Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News with us now, and one of the big things that came out, Mike, is the potential and probability of the NBA draft age going back to 18 from 19, which is funny and huge, but funny that it has happened after the transfer portal and after the NIL. And boy, now it's really going to get fun because the guys that are first round draft picks, they're not likely to stay in college. And then the guys in the second round, that upper half, they probably may not have a decision to make. The bottom half definitely will have a decision to make, but it's going to change the face of college a little bit.
Well, I think it's first important to say that this hasn't happened yet, and it's still,
right.
We were given to believe around 2019 that this was a certainty, and ultimately, what happened was as they got into negotiating it, the players weren't getting enough in return for giving up something that they thought that that protected their current jobs. Adrian Wojnarowski said in a tweet last night, it will be a significant part of the CBA discussions, but nothing has advanced on the elimination of that rule. And so, and he said if it does happen, it'll happen several years from now because teams have traded draft picks under the assumption that the current rule would be in place. And so basically what he's saying in saying that is that if you eliminate that rule, you are now making draft picks less valuable. That's simply the reality of it. Because you go from drafting players who have proven themselves in some degree, some way, shape, or form, whether it's in the G League for the Ignite program, whether it's overseas, we don't get that much anymore, but the option obviously still exists, whether it's in college. Those picks are much more valuable in the current landscape than they are in a landscape where a high school kid can enter with very little training, very little having been proven. Amani Bates, you mentioned him before we went into the break. That Bates is a young man who would have been a very high pick when he became eligible for the draft, based on pure raw talent. They went into college and showed he's not ready. I mean, he wasn't ready for college. How is he going to be ready for the Indiana Pacers? And not that necessarily they would take him, because maybe we'll give them the benefit of the doubt of being smarter than that. But how's he going to handle playing against the Indiana Pacers, let's say, if he can't handle playing against East Carolina? I wrote a piece and I retweeted it with Woj's take on it, on this, that I wrote in 2018 about how great the age limit rule has been for the NBA, let alone college basketball. What it's done for college basketball by putting players like Derrick Rose and Kevin Durant and Anthony Davis and Zion Williamson on the college stage. It's been tremendous for the NBA. None of the I've talked to multiple NBA scouts / executives or player executives over the years. None of them want this rule to go away. Makes their job 100 times harder. Oh, here's a high school kid playing against 5'8" guys. How good is he? I mean, that's just not the ideal situation. Fran Fraschilla said in that article, the great ESPN analyst said in that article, that's why baseball drafts 40 rounds, because they're going to miss, 2/3 of the time now, because you're drafting high school kids. You don't know how they're going to develop. But you put somebody on a stage like college basketball, where you're playing against high-level opposition, talented young people that are being high-level coached by people like, a lot of the John Calipari, Bill Self, Tom Izzo, Mike Bray, whoever. That's a different deal than a high school game, where it's just got, young. Obviously, a lot of them are going to prep schools now, but some of those are really well coached, like Montverde down in Florida, and some of them aren't coached at all. Just guys that, that are in the right place at the right time and can't coach at all. So it's just not the same thing. So I'm very hopeful always that the NBA will come to its senses and realize that they're damaging their own business by moving in that direction. I think that the Players Association has always been since Adam Silver started pushing in this direction about 2017, 2018, the Players Association stood and said, it's not really going to help us. So why do we want to do that? They shouldn't have to be, like the guardians of the game. I mean, that should be Silver's job. And I do not understand at all his approach. I never have since he turned at one point. Don't forget, at one point, Adam Silver was an advocate of a 20-year age limit as associate commissioner, and I believe it for a period of time as commissioner of the league, was an advocate of upping the age limit. And now he's pushing eliminating it altogether. Make no mistake, putting it 18 is eliminating it altogether.
So what's interesting to me, Mike, is for the longest time, we've seen a lot of people, whether it's in the media, sometimes college basketball coaches, it just depends on, who you're listening to, what you're watching, have been adamant against the one and done, at least in my memories. Do you think it's more of this perception, an old school perception, that if you eliminate the one and done, you'll have those kids who are ready for the NBA jump to the NBA draft, and then you'll have more of the guys stick around for 3 or 4 years? Because we were talking.
You want to talk about fantasies,
right?
I mean, it's like Trae Young. Okay, so Trae Young coming out of high school, I think he was the 25th or 30th player, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah. I'm not even sure. I'd have to look it up whether he was McDonald's All-American. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But he comes out of college, out of high school, and he was widely recruited. I think Kentucky wanted him, but they didn't get him, and he goes to Oklahoma because it's close to home, plays for Lon for a year. He didn't need a second year of college at all. Okay, now we see what he's got. You couldn't see it against high school guys. Not that he wasn't out there doing those things, but they didn't look that impressive, again, because they're high school guys. But then he comes into the Big 12, starts doing that stuff. It's like, wow, he's really something. And let's go get him. And so that guy's still going. So now you'll get the guys who go out of high school because they're highly rated by the recruiting analysts, and that that has been somewhat hit or miss. I mean, Skal Labissiere, number 1, number 2 player in his class in 2015. By the end of his freshman year, clearly needed a second year, but his economic circumstances dictated that he needed to be a professional. That was pre-NIL, obviously. And so he gets taken around 27th or 28th, has 3-4 years of not great NBA experience, and then he's gone from the league. That's not helping anybody. It's, I was happy for Skal that he was able to get some money, but in the current environment, Skal now could make money in the way that other players are doing, make NIL money, and so then there wouldn't be that desperation. And then after it showed, his freshman year showed that he wasn't ready. He's a talented kid, but he wasn't ready. Maybe he goes a second year and gets ready, and then he lasts in the league and makes $150 million. I mean, that stuff happened. It's happened many times in college, in basketball over the years with athletes who went through college. Kenyon Martin, when I covered Kenyon Martin, after his sophomore year, people were pushing him to go pro. He said no. After his junior year, I asked him, you think you think you'll be here next year? I was in the locker room after they lost their NCAA tournament game, and he said, where else would I go? He probably would have been 15th, 16th, 18th, 20th player taken in his junior year. Instead, he stays his senior year. He becomes the number 1 overall player taken. Making that decision probably made him conservatively $100 million because he wasn't ready, and then he was.
Wow. I mean, that's staggering, and there is no other story that puts it in perspective better than that. We're such a want it now society. I got to have it now. But really, and I asked this question earlier, how many true one and dones are there?
I think the number's higher now than it used to be. And so, this year was a strange year. I don't know exactly what the motivation was, because we had backtracked a little bit from guys jumping into the draft just to do it because of the first year of NIL. People said, hey, I can get ready and I can get paid both at the same time. Whereas before it was a choice. So we didn't have that many in 21. Yet you had examples like Ayo Dosunmu, who, although he did not become a first-round pick, he should have been. Some teams really blew it on him. But he became a really significant player in his first year, and he wouldn't have been if he bounces out of college after his sophomore year when he's only shooting 31, 32, 33%. He comes back, he shoots over 40, and then he's a regular member of the Bulls rotation as a rookie. He's going to be able to sign for a significant amount of money because he got ready. That's the difference. So this year we had the two kids from Michigan. Highly disappointing that they did what they did, again, because they didn't have to with NIL. Trevor Keels from Duke, another player who could have used another year. You should never be going as a first-round potential player as into the second round in today's environment. That's a huge mistake. But we'll see lots of those and lots more of blown draft picks if we get rid of the age limit altogether. And again, that doesn't help the young people. It doesn't help the teams. It doesn't help the sport. The idea of an 18-year age limit in the current environment would damage the sport at all three levels, much in the way that it did from 1995 to 2006. The game's popularity went down, again, at all three levels. You put this rule in place, and now people are like, if you remember the scene, I don't know if you saw it on the internet, the night of the 2019 NBA draft, the marketing front office for the New Orleans Pelicans, not on the night of the draft, but the night of the lottery, when the Pels won the lottery, and how the people in the Pelicans front office were going berserk because they were going to get Zion. Doesn't happen in an age, without the age limit, because nobody knows the players. In 2000, the year I covered Kenyon Martin's draft up in Minneapolis, they used to. I haven't covered the draft in a while, but they used to have these round tables. They put a player at a big round table like they do at Big Ten Media Day, or used to, before the pandemic, so we couldn't be as close. But they put the players around at a table, and then all the media would sort of bounce in and out, sit down with the player, ask some questions, and then go ask some questions of another player. So they have that, and I'm there for Kenyon Martin. And then after it's all over, I'm walking down the hall behind Darius Miles. And I said to myself, Darius Miles is going to be one of the top 5 players taken in the draft tomorrow. And I'm one of about 1,200 people in America who has seen him play. How can that be good for the game? How can that be good for the business of the game? And as it turned out, Darius had a good year or two, but was pretty much a bust. I think he was the number 2 or 3 overall player taken. Pretty much a bust. There are lots of those stories in the preps to pros era. There are only, 3-4 LeBron, Kobe, Kevin Garnett stories.